Hi, Michael Holter. I'm going to be painting for you today a demonstration of a figure, a face, a human. This gentleman here, we ran into him, my wife Cindy and I, when we were down doing a plein air event in painting down in Rockport, Texas with the Outdoor Painters Society. Interesting character. I like the way the light's falling on his face. He's got some a little bit of glint in his eye. I think it's going to be fun to try to get that. And it should be something that, because he's a male with a lot of character and with his beard, I should be able to get it accomplished in a fairly quick amount of time. Not quite as delicate as some other images would be, female or something like that. So let's take a look here. This is the way I have it drawn out. I've drawn it out with a fairly hard pencil. I use any method I can get to get it on the paper, freehand it or project it or grid it, whatever works best at the time for the subject that I've got. This one here is drawn out and ready to go, and I'm going to try to work on capturing him in as few strokes as possible so we can get this thing accomplished in a fairly quick turnaround. So I'm going to start with the area of the hat, I believe. This sort of skull cap that he has. Take a little bit of ultramarine blue, burnt sienna, make a gray mixture. Quite gray, maybe even add a little warmth to it. A little too much, a little more blue. You might even use some neutral tint in there. So I'm going to start right up at the top and work my way down. I'm going to start with the darkest areas. In this case here, I'm going to leave the paper white this time. Usually I will tone the paper quite a bit before I start when I'm doing a figure, but I'm going to approach this a little differently. This is on Arch's 300-pound cold press paper. Go throw a little violet in here, make it a little colorful, and see if I can't do a few little lines here. There's some little seams and some shadows here. There's some things that happen on this little cap of his that are kind of interesting. There's definitely a strong shadow underneath there, and it goes along here back into the back, and back in here we're going to start losing that a little bit because it's going to drop my board there, excuse me. Up in here I'm going to take and bring some of this over into the left side where there's some light, and just sort of drag it over and try to turn it into the light areas with a minimal amount of effort here. Taking the brush, a little bit of moisture in it, not much, and we're going to just sort of soften this, tickle the edges a little bit here. And then I'm going to take a larger brush, a flat brush, and I'm going to put some color behind this side over here and see what I can do to sort of put a little bit of a foil to this foreground here, this light area. A lot of water. And there's lots of whiskers coming through here in this area. So I'm going to try to dance around a little bit and leave some of the facial hair just wisping here. I drop a little bit more interesting color in over here just to make it a little more interesting. And this is a little wet over here. I think I will go back and try to put a little color into this shadow side of his face, hair, all of this. Should have left a little bit of a trail here, I think, of the edge of his shirt back here, just to give that a little bit of definition. And he's got a blue shirt on, so I could just stay with these colors, I guess. I wouldn't have to. Need to warm this up a little bit, maybe some more burnt sienna. Just going to soften this off with a little water so it doesn't I don't get any hard edges in there. I think I will stay with some warm tones on this shirt rather than all the blue. There's a, can't really see it, but there's going to be some things going on over here. And he's got this, I guess it's part of the way the hat goes. There's a little seam up there or something. So there's a lot of different ways to approach painting a figure. This happens to be a little different than what I often do, just because first of all, it's I have a time commitment that has to be met, and the nature of this particular character, I think, works for this a little bit more rapid approach. So most of his face is in shadow. The only thing that's really catching a lot of light is this area down in here. So let me think what I want to do is take a little bit of a even an orange here on my brush. That's maybe a little too much orange with a little burnt sienna. He's got a definite definite orange tone right here in his mustache, down into his facial hair down here, and I really like to see if I can't keep it out like that. I kind of like it. I always sort of start with the lighter colors, lighter values, brighter colors, work my way darker, cooler. I'm going to go up toward the top here and start with some warm tones. This is drying now a little bit. It's still a little wet, so I don't want to get into that too much, but I want to get some color onto the face. Let's see. I'm going to start with some warm tones here. A little bit of violet up in this area. Doesn't matter if I go right over the white area of the eyeball here, it's in the shadows. Just trying to put a little color in here. Maybe a little more red. A little violet in there. It's quite violet into this socket here. A little bit of caution here on this. Just going to tickle the edges of this a little bit, soften. Just take off some of the harshness on some of these little pieces right here. This the nose has fairly violet tone to it, and then as it comes down toward the tip of the nose, usually it would pick up a little more red. Let's take a little of this edge off of some of this here. And we go down under the nose here with a little more of this tone. It's a little bit on the red side. Comes off of his nose over here. Let's do a little bit of a little more orange. I think it needs a little more color on these cheeks here. Like right in here. And need to find the place where this all kind of comes together here. The whiskers and the skin tone. Still a little damp, so it'll pick up a little bit of the, will work in there a little nicely. Okay, this comes way down to here. Using my reds are a cad red light medium hue or a scarlet lake, one of those. A little orange is an Aza orange. Just want to make sure I've got this in the right spot here. that needs to go much more violet down in here. This is quinacridone violet. It's pretty strong. I got a little much on my brush right there. Maybe a little bit of the red. A little gradation from the violet to the red to the sunlit side of the cheek, which would by implication then be a kind of a warm yellow tone. The area under here, under the facial hair now, would be my next concern. I'm trying to get the base layer of color in here. Let me do, let's see, let me do these areas of the lips first with the reds. This is an area here. A little more alizarin maybe in here. I usually use a lot of alizarin on the lips area. So the shadow area of the mustache up here is going to be going to still have that orange look, burnt sienna. Got too much ultramarine blue there. Let's try it again. It's probably a color I can live with there. This brush is a Japanese or Chinese brush, kind of a calligraphy brush, I guess, and it works well for certain certain things. It's kind of nice to get a little bit of break. It isn't quite as solid as some of the brushes I might use. So I got that orange on there, but I didn't really get enough of it to make it feel right. So I think I'll pull some of this down in here. Now over here, I need to be really just dancing around a little bit with this brush, give it a little bit of the hair, the whiskers down here. Now he's got, I didn't get much of the red down in there. I should have a little more tone down in here. So that orange, burnt sienna and orange that I have there, I think I can continue that around here a little bit. Should go up in here. So right in here, you're going to let the let some of the wet in the wet work, because I just wet it down pretty good. darken that up with some of this other stuff. Go pick some of this orangey stuff and soften it a little bit. Just taking a damp brush here and this side, the facial hair over on this side gets much more cool. It's almost blue, so the cerulean of the sky is putting blue into it. I'll put some cerulean in there, and I'll take this other brush and do some of that. So I notice now that I didn't put any color on the ear over here, which I could at this point, or I could just let it go without the, you know, the reds of the rest of it here. I could do something different over there, since it's in the shadows like that. Okay, well, I'll just let's start just by doing the more violet. Let's put a little red on it. Little lost edges in here, sort of lost into the shadows maybe. And I didn't put any of the warm tones down into the neck here either. Okay. Go back up in here. I see really a bright white spot right there I don't like. I'm just going to soften that edge, make it a transition in there. Maybe some of these drips here I can fix with a little lift here. So the down in here there's a definite the clavicle. It's a little darker up in here. And he's got his darker right in there. Don't like the way that looks right there. I'm going to do take some burnt sienna. I don't like this big circular thing. I'm going to do something here just to kind of break that up. Yeah, it just looks more and a little splash here and there to have some fun with it. Alright, the bones are there now. I think. Got to decide what I want to do with the hair. I'm going to decide if I'm going to do a negative painting behind the hair here and keep it light, or if I want to just do it kind of dark because it's in the shadows. It's got some good things going for it. So let me I'm going to dry this for a minute. I want to make sure I get it good and dry up here where I start working on the eyes. So an important part of this story is really about the eyes. Let's take a closer look here. The eyes on this guy are probably blue. My lightest blue that I have is cobalt teal, which is not the best color for this in some ways because it is it's kind of an opaque color that sits on the surface a bit. If I had a staining blue it would be better, but I don't have one on my palette, so we use this one here. We use the cobalt teal as our underpainting for where the eyes are going to be, where the iris color in the eye. Now I'm going to dry that, I think, in a second here. Let me before I do that, though, I'm going to take a small brush. So the light is coming from this side, and there's a little bit of light areas in his eye. So there's one area of light right in here. I'm going to try to go back a little bit in value and take some of the blue off, and maybe a little bit over here. There we go. Now I'll dry that. Eyes are kind of a especially fun area to work on. They really are the window to the soul, and it's fun to paint just from the standpoint of this little abstract area of their eye, and you can make a lot happen by getting the eyes right. That should be dry. The next step is to take a, since I want to make them blue eyes, I'm going to use some ultramarine blue pretty much straight from the tube with a little moisture in it. And I'm going to put some of that on the outside edge of the iris, and probably a little bit in here where his pupil would be. Really can't see it very well. And I tell my students to not do a lot of, not make up a lot of things that aren't there. You know, you don't want to be in that business of fiction when it comes to things like these eyes and so on. So I'm going to take some reds now and some warm tones and put some of this into the corners here. But these, the eye itself, the blue that I put in there in the eye, I have to soften now that it's sat for just a little bit. I want to manipulate this. Try to get something that looks representative of what's in the photo, perhaps, but mostly I'm just trying to get an eye that looks like it could be a real eye. And it's just a matter of sort of dancing around a little bit with the brush until you think you have something. Use some moisture. The eye on the right has very little going on. It's very much just a little slit. Now, bringing in some more of this warm tone here. There's a fold above the eye here that's important. I do not do a lot of, work on the lower lid. Kind of like to see it be a little bit abstract that way, so it's not overly finished off. And those areas that I just put in there on the upper lid, that upper line there, they need to be manipulated, softened. Look for the direction of the shadows. Look for things to, where does it get soft? What part of the eye? What part of this gets softer and what part of it stays pretty firm? A little lifting here and there and a little scrubbing. Not scrubbing down to get the paper scrubbed. In other words, it's just to get a little bit of manipulation of that shape. He has a little bit of the white part of his eye showing there, but I don't want it to be white anyway, so it's not going to stick out like a white part of his eye. This part over here is a little ragged edge. Let's clean that up a little bit. So just by doing that, you see his face starts to take shape here. It starts to come alive a little bit. Pull his face out of that fog that I've created there. One of the things about painting these faces is there's a lot of life in the eyes, nose, and mouth. That's where the real action is. So I'll start off usually with the eyes after I get some the base colors in and all that. And the eyes, nose, mouth, and the nose here I'm putting in some alizarin, quite a strong, almost straight from the tube alizarin. And I do that in the nostril area because I want it to be warm. I don't want it to have, I want it to be cold, like you kind of look at a photo and it looks kind of almost black or dark, and I don't want it to have that feel. I want it to have a life to it. And I soften the bottom edge because it's it gets dark up in there, but it's not It's not dark down here. And there's a, I can take a little more of this tone that I have here and make sure that this stays dark around the edge of the nostril here. I don't know if it shows on the screen that much, but when you see the when you see this color go down, it looks pretty red. But when it settles, when it settles in, it changes a bit. I'm going to put a little violet in it. So now you got the nose, nostrils a little bit more clear. Now the mouth is very, not very distinct. It's covered with the facial hair, but there is a little bit of it's a real dark spot right over here on this side. And you can even see his teeth just a tad in there. And I don't like to leave it untouched. I like to get this to have a little bit of character here. Usually the lower lip's got some marks on it, some lines that come down. So he starts to take shape. The eyebrows are an interesting part. There's a this one over here is mostly hit with the light, and then it gets a little bit warmer as it goes that across. It's a I like to use like a raw sienna. This is catching the light in here. And then it kind of comes down and it gets a little darker, not much, maybe a little bit of sepia. A little bit of sepia right there. Soften those edges. Soften these edges up here. The light's hitting it, so it can't be real strong, it can't be real dark. You really don't see much detail on it on the photo, and it's okay. You just want to show a little bit of the shape of that eyebrow. The other side is a little darker, but let's stay with the same plan here. Bit of this raw sienna. Looks like it goes way up there, almost to the hat, and then there's this little bit of sepia between. Okay, let's try to follow the angles and the direction of the hairs, the way it's been, the way his eyebrow goes. You want to follow that as best you can. This is softer over here, softer down there. Kind of loses. And there's a little bit of color in here that needs to be added, I think. A little bit of this red. A little more color in there. All right, we got them coming together a little bit. I'm going to jump over here by the ear. Over here, it needs to be darker. There's a definite darkness there of where the hair falls underneath the is underneath the ear there, and it kind of defines this area. And way up into there, and so this brush can give you some of those nice broken things pretty easily. And I think a little bit more dark, a little more blue right up in here. Let it bleed down. This is where the shirt, the shoulder ends, right in here. I'll put a little bit of an edge right there. Push that back. Water. Just mostly water. Pick up some of that. Okay, while that's still a little bit damp here, I could probably add a few little hairs coming in. A little too wet right there. This is a little palette knife from Joe Miller. So as this dries, I want to wait just a second here, let it dry a little more. All right. So I got the big shapes in. I got the eyes, nose, mouth, and I got a little dark over here to kind of offset that a little bit. I like what's happening with that. Maybe I need to. I just need to soften a little bit in here just make me feel better if I do this. Sometimes this is very much the intuitive part. The reason why I do that is you know, do these little things is because it just seems like it needs it, and I don't know how to describe that to students. It's just what I do. Okay. Alright, there's some details now. We get into the detail phase of this. We've been kind of in that phase, but once we get past the eyes, nose, and mouth, we start really picking into the details. I think there's some bit of shadow here. This needs to go over just a little more, I think, and there's a little darker. And there's small bits of skin and showing through where the hairs are. There's texture right in here that needs a little more definition. And as the sun comes through here, there's some little areas that and I'll try to leave a few of those little marks that I accidentally made. When I was brushing this in, I left some little whites in there. It wasn't necessarily so much intentional as it was just happened. And they're in a good spot, so I can work around them. And that's quite a bit more warm than what's in the photo. That's all right. Let me cool it down a little bit over here. I'll go with some ultramarine blue. And we'll just let some of that happen here. There's a way to show a little bit of a line, a linear kind of hair fragment coming down. It's a plus if we can get that to work. This needs to be a little more value to it. Just put a little more red into it. Maybe even a little violet. Okay. Now we need to get into some of those other features, the features around the eyes. There's several nice linear things there that are part of the this guy's face. This comes really to a point down in here, and then you get this wonderful crow's foot kind of thing happening here. Now you don't have to paint all this kind of stuff, but kind of add some of the character in here a little bit. But you can't just leave it either. You gotta work with it. And then sometimes you end up sort of erasing it and then have to come back and add some later. or darken an area. What you're really looking for here is just to get the impression of some of those little areas where there's a crow's foot or the you know, just the variation, the subtle variations in the tone of the shape of the face here. Using a little different color here and there to pop it a little more, a little reds, a little violets, a little bit of orange. All those tones are there. Sometimes hard to see them. Okay. I think we're getting there, starting to come alive. On the other side, it's very subtle. There's a few little marks going in there. It's pretty violet in there in a way, because it was very violet altogether, but let's add a little bit more tone in here. A warm tone of violet. Soften some edges a little bit here and there. And then the main thing now is just to find little tiny things that can add a little life to this guy. You know, what are these little features and things that might make it interesting here? Here's the edge of his hat. Put a little edge to this here. That violet should come back in here again. There's some red violet stuff up in here. I must have gotten some red in there. It looks quite red. And we have certainly have a bunch of the hair coming in here, working right into that shadow of the hat. This little long round velvet touch brush has this great point. It's good for calligraphy or these kinds of marks, but it's also substantial enough that you can do more with it than that. I think I'm going to drop some additional color up in there, a little red, just to jazz it up a little bit there, and give it a little interest. Might have been a little too much, but it'll dry down. So when we get to this kind of stage, it's just a matter of little things here and there that I want to try to emphasize or try to bring into focus, and some things to kind of help the composition work. I've got some nice lost edges. I have a lost edge right here. I kind of like it. I could go in there and do a dark on the outside and change that to a real solid found edge, but I kind of like I got this found edge here and I got a lost edge there, found edge here. I like that. I like that. That's a fun little opportunity, and all these edges here I can work on a little bit, but I'm not going to try to lose them. Now I could do a little dark behind that right there to make that edge a little bit more. I mean, it's a found edge, but I could make it even stronger right in here. Sometimes I just like to have my little dark areas like this to just bring your eye where you want it to go, you know. Water. It's got the dark there, his face here, the dark's there. I think that kind of angle is kind of a nice angle to have. One of the things about this this kind of a situation, when you have this position, you've got lots of things you can do, and you have to learn what not to do. The creator of Dilbert Comics is Scott Adams, and Scott Adams said that creativity is allowing yourself to make mistakes. Art is knowing which ones to keep. And that's the stage I'm at, is what do I keep here and what do I let go? What do I turn into a real defined edge, and what do I let go? Like the edge of his beard down here on the photo, it's quite distinct right down in here. Now I lost some of that white because I put color in here, but I could, if I were to go behind here with some darks, it would really make that pop. But then I'd have it, I'd have to balance that off probably with some other darks. So it's always a little bit of a balancing act. Now when I do a lot of my figures, I'll do a lot of glazes over the tops of the background, over different parts, over the clothing. In this case here, I'm doing a much more direct approach, mainly because it's a quicker demo, and don't need to bore you with layers upon layers of paint. I'm going to take a little bit of color here, and I'm going to put this value in right here. There's an area that definitely has some more color to it, more value. And again, it might look pretty red when you first put it on there. Probably should have had that a little cooler. Drop a little bit of cerulean right into that and let it kind of cool it down a little bit. Since we are on the shadow side over here, there's definitely a cooler thing happening. So this does come down a little further in here. I can just sort of tickle this and make it come down a little bit more. Very subtle color change or value change, either way you want to look at it. Notice right now that I have a pretty distinct white spot right there that I failed to hit with any color when I started, and that's kind of poking its eye out, poking me in the eye, I should say, poking me in the eye. All right, we're getting there. This area over here, I'm going to take some warm tones, a little violet as well, cool it a little bit, and I'm going to try to indicate. You look at the hairs on his face. There's lots of little wisps of hair, and they leave these little sort of teardrop spaces as they curve around. Just going to try to indicate some of these. He needs a little orange in there. So I'm just sort of letting the brush help me to create some of this idea that the skin is showing through these whiskers a tad. You know, and even over here I could do a little bit of something. The shadows. There's shadows within this curly, wispy hair. Now again, I don't need to try to get every little wisp of hair here, but I want to try to indicate some of the separation where the hair breaks away And there's a little bit of skin showing through. Soften a couple of these up a little bit. And as it goes down, these become greener, bluer, more cool. They're picking up the coolness in the shadow side here. And his whiskers probably have, just have some of that grayness to them. So we can shift into the blues a little bit here. I'm going to soften some of the edges a little bit, manipulate these a little. You can do it any way you want to. So I'm trying to decide here if I should do an edge along here or leave it, leave it lost. And of course, the same is true over here. Do I want to bring that in or do I want to leave it lost? I kind of like the lost edge idea over here. Let me, there's a little bit of a blossom here. Maybe I can soften that a little bit. But it's kind of nice too. It kind of gives a little bit of that feeling of the hair. Where I see an edge that I don't like, I can scrub it a little bit and lift it, soften that edge. I do think I need to give a little bit of a, excuse me, little bit of a form to the back side. I'm just going to make some kind of grayish stuff here, and I think this hair needs to be a little more of a I'm just looking to see if I like what I got there or not. I didn't like that exactly, that found edge there. I want to lose it a little bit. Ultramarine blue that I have on the other side would be okay over here, and that would Purple in there too. So this is, again, this stage is the stage where you just sort of work your way around and try to find nice areas of color. I like to put some oranges in my the highlight areas, like over here there's some sun hitting this. Hitting his the brighter side of his face. Drop a little bit of orange in there. It's the way the sun is going to give a warmth, bright warmth to some of these areas. And even a little bit on the nose here. Some of the hairs are going to catch some really bright orangey kind of tones. This shadow side over here is definitely going to pick up cooler tones. I like to use some cobalt teal sometimes to just indicate some coolness into the shadows. Even on the hat here, a little layer of that, and maybe in the hair. So just a few things here and there, and just to give it a little definition. So this eye is sort of bothering me over here. Gonna need a little bit of value down in here. The eyes are important, and let me find a smaller brush. I think I will lift back now some of this that I just put in there. I like to have a little bit of, again, this a little bit of the reds into the corners of the eyes. A little brighter color in some of these areas. One of the things is on the eyes, there is that typically, if the light's shining a little bit more on the eye than it is here, there'll be a little catch light like by the pupil, and I'm going to take an X-Acto blade here and just pick a little bit of spot of that, a little spot of light out, and I think you can see that kind of adds a little bit of that life into the eye. You can use that as well for don't want to cut the paper, but you can scrape into the paper enough to leave a nice little mark. I think I want to do one little thing with this ear over here. This violet that I put in here is kind of a not so attractive. I put a little red over it and just change the value or the color of that a little bit. Just warm it up a tad. It was kind of really cold to me. I don't want to put a lot of color over there. I think it's kind of nice to have it a little subtle. Got my warm tones over here, and this is all in shadow and cooler. I think it's kind of a fun approach. So, with that, I think I'm about done. I think I will take I'm going to take a little bit of pigment here and I'm going to sign the bottom of this. And call it done. I'm going to take the tape off of here. You can see what it looks like. And let me get it off of this white board so it'll be easier to see. I ended up taping the side a little bit to square it. It was a little off square, and I didn't really like the shoulders over on that side and the angle. It was a little bit too much space over here, so I just put more tape on there to square it up and make it look a little bit more what I wanted. So there it is. I kind of nicknamed him the Pirate early on because I thought that cap was kind of a little pirate-like or something, but you can call him whatever you want, but he's done. Thank you so much. Thank you for participating in this demonstration, for watching and being with us. I hope that you learned something. And this is one way to paint a portrait. So I hope you enjoyed it, and I sure did. It was a good time. I think it turned out well, and I'm happy with it. And I'll leave you to it, as they say on Downton Abbey. I'll leave you to it. Bye.